What's your thoughts on government cover-ups or covert societies attempting to control humanity? Do you believe in ancient astronauts, intergalactic communication, or extraterrestrial visitations? Ever had an experience with disembodied spirits or the paranormal universe? Are these subjects fact or fiction? Each week, Tony and Eddie explore these unbelievable realities and beyond. Exclusively on Truth Be Told.
Hello and welcome back to another broadcast of Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie. I'm your host, Tony Sweet, and with me now, world-renowned psychic, Eddie Connor.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks so much, everybody. Stewart Pearce is an international speaker, sound healer, seer, and my favorite, an angel medium, and we are thrilled to have him with us today.
Stewart has accomplished so many things in his life, but one especially being the head of voice at the renowned Webber Douglas Academy for 18 years. And he also took time to write 4 books, including The Alchemy of Voice,
The Heart's Note,
The Angels of Atlantis,
and Angels and the Keys of Paradise. Stewart practices in London as an angelic sound healer and master of presentation, having coached the presenters for the London 2012 Olympic bid, Diana, Princess of Wales, and many other illustrious clients who use their voice and persona as powerful soul-filled expressions for ennobling human nature. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and get ready for an amazing, mind-blowing hour with the internationally famous Stewart Pearce.
Wow. Internationally. Stewart, welcome back.
Hi.
Oh my gosh, it's
so
been
good to be here.
forever.
I always look forward coming into your studio and seeing you both. You're so extraordinary.
Oh,
what light and love you bring to this work.
Oh,
I
you're so
bless you for your
sweet.
Well,
contribution.
well, same to you. I
Well, thank
mean,
you.
we're doing it here just locally. You're traveling the world, making a difference. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, and we always have so much fun talking to Stewart when we're off camera too.
I know.
That's
Yeah.
that's the real show, ladies and gentlemen.
Some of you may not want to talk about. No.
So as we were saying, no.
Well, so tell us what you're doing back here in L.A.
Yeah.
So what's going on?
So, well, I'm here with lots and lots of meetings. I'm meeting a new literary agent next week, which is great fun. So that will steer me in the direction of a new publisher, possibly. And therefore disseminating my work in a very broad way throughout the spectrum of the United States. I have a workshop coming up, which I'm doing a big masterclass at the Actors Studio, but that's just for the members of the Actors Studio tomorrow. So I think about 80 people are booked in. So that's fun. We're going to have 4 hours of frolic through the magnetic voice.
The frolic.
And the frolic through the magnetic voice. And then on the 19th, I'm doing another workshop called The Voice of Power. Ooh. So you're most welcome to come as my
what's
guests.
that about?
Well, it'll be for actors, for presenters, for public speakers, and for those people who are interested in freedom of speech. So what we're going to do is look into the power of our voices. When are they powerful and when they're not powerful? The rest I will leave up to your imagination.
That's going to be good. And this is the 19th?
The 19th of November,
That's coming up
here in
quick.
Los Angeles.
What day? What
so
day
that's,
is that?
Well, that's next
Saturday.
weekend. Not
Okay.
this weekend, tomorrow, but the following weekend, Saturday, yeah.
Well, since we saw you, I think in February.
Yeah.
What have
After
you been
Conscious
doing
Life.
since we've talked? I mean, you left, went back home, and
Was it February of this year or last year?
this year? I think.
This year.
Was it this
know.
year?
Yeah.
Seems like longer.
Well, so much has happened, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's the-
Oh.
yeah. So we're wrinkling time.
Yeah, we
Right.
is, child.
Expanding and contracting time. So much has happened, yeah.
So
But, you know, I can't answer that question. I can't really remember what I've done because I'm always doing something
yeah,
new.
that's true. That's true.
But, you know, I'm just whizzing around the world, really, working.
Well, since you've been gone, Kelly Clarkson, I want to know what you think. You said you wrote a piece just the other day. You know, the U.S. has had an election. Donald Trump is now going to be the president of the United States. The country is probably more divided than most people remembered in recent history, or in possibly in history since the Civil War.
Yep.
But seeing it from overseas, how do you view what America's going through right now, and what direction do we need to go to heal?
Especially based on your expertise in what you do as an angelic sound healer and all of the other magnificent things that we want to make sure everybody's aware of with you.
With the Angels of Atlantis.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that something very powerfully historic is taking place. And I don't just mean about the event that's happened this week. I mean that it is actually interlinked with windows within history that are highly significant, that bring about a global change in the citizens of this world. The determination is very simple. The determination is that we have been led towards an appreciation or an understanding of diversity, because that seems to be rife wherever we go, that there are many people in either contention or in contempt for what's actually taken place, even though we're living in a democracy, and the democracy has actually voted in the direction that it's voted. And so what we're seeing in dismay and despondency is that perhaps the choice that was made is not the one that we wanted. I hasten to add that the gentleman that's been elected is the president-elect. He is not in office yet.
Right, yet.
And so much could take place that would maneuver in the skillful direction of the American peoples, could maneuver this gentleman out of office. Much could happen. We're living in very extraordinary times. So I believe that what we're being called to, very simply, is to not engage in hatred, not engage in the diversity, not engage in the contention, or whatever we may want to call it, but to lead ourselves towards something which is that we truly believe in, that actually what we're all about is trying to find a way of loving throughout the capacity of our outreach, whether it be in the field of politics or in the corporate world or in the field of the major establishments, or indeed in the locality of our own specific lives. So something vast is taking place. There are astrological configurations that have sort of predicted what is taking place. There seems to be a very unique vibration around, touching the mic, a very unique vibration around November the 9th, because November the 9th, 1939, I believe it was. Let me just check the date.
I thought you said 38.
1938.
Yeah.
Was this horrific twist of fate that occurred in the terrifying pogrom against the Jewish people that we now call Kristallnacht, which was the birth of the Holocaust. And then if we flash forward to 1989, November the 9th, 1989, was a unique event when the Berlin Wall came down. And there is this extraordinary document that's been released as a result of that event, which was that when Mikhail Gorbachev handed the peace book to Ronald Reagan, Gorbachev said, "I'm now going to do something terrible to you." And Reagan said, "What?" And Gorbachev said, "I'm now going to take your enemy away from you."
Wow.
Whoa.
That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, because we're the only country in the world who has embassies in every country in the world where we can take something from them.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So what we see as a result of that statement is the resonance of, well, what do we then do? We then created the horror of an Islamic terrorist called Osama bin Laden, or indeed Saddam Hussein. And then the terrible, I still have images in my consciousness of the terrible event of 9/11. I mean, how can one even conceive of that? I remember sitting for about 7 hours with my eyes glued to the TV screen watching it all happen, and I still somehow can't conceive of what took place. Having been in New York recently and having visited that site, that great vortex of energy, which is an opening, an orifice for divine peace to reign, that we really need to look at some of the extraordinary events that have taken place, that have moved us as global citizens, or indeed you in citizens of this country, into understanding how we can move forward through our own specific orientation, so that we're constantly using thought creates reality and feeling brings about the actualization of the manifestation, that we're trying to bring together unity in our peoples rather than diversity. So rather than becoming hysterical about what's taken place, I believe that what the angels are saying is very simply, well, how can you measure this within your own consciousness? How can you actually step forward and literally pray love in the direction of the gentleman that's the president-elect? and all of the other people that are surrounding him that we understand maybe not of the truest and the most loving force. That's the perception that's out there. Maybe actually what they're trying to do is something else. Maybe they're trying to find a way of being more liberal and less diverse themselves. Who knows?
Well, I've heard two things. So some people are saying that 11-9, flipping it, 9/11. I've heard this quite a few times saying it's the same numbers, 9/11. So I don't know numerology.
Astrology and numerology.
Yeah, numerology. I don't know if it means anything in.
Well, yeah, it does. I mean, because the numbers are vibrations.
Yeah.
And I know this well because I'm numerically dyslexic, so I struggle with numbers, but I can at the same time feel my intuitive or soul consciousness reaching into the vibration of what the numerological sequence is. And number 11 is the sacred structuralist. So it's when an individual or a group of individuals or indeed an event in world history brings us all to an understanding that we need to find ways of really enhancing the truest modus that we can bring about in our lives, and get together as we saw with Occupy Wall Street and simply say we will not tolerate this. What we want to do is to bring about a big change, and I say through non-violent peaceful protest, please.
Yes, please.
Number 9 is the number of completion. So this is a number 9 year, and next year we move into the 10 year, which is the number 1, which is the Magus. It's the beginning of a new dawning. So it seems that these numerological sequences are patterns of cosmic faith that are bringing a very new intelligence into our beings. This is what I receive in meditation from the angels.
I also in 2012 when the Mayan calendar and it ended and for a while it's going to end of the world, but they said it was a new beginning, and they said it brought into the feminine energy, and that's why everybody said Hillary's going to win. Because this is a new age of feminine rule. Why do you think that didn't come to, or potentially, in 4 years is actually when in America, that's the 100-year anniversary of the suffrage, where women could the right to vote.
Yes.
And they got the right to vote because the powers that be that were running the government decided they needed extra money, so they gave them the power to vote and then put them in the workplace, as it were, so they would get double the taxes.
Right. Who would have thunk?
Yeah.
Indeed. Yes.
But what do you think?
Yes.
Why do you think the universe did not put somebody?
Our minds automatically reach out for the literal definition. So, as we're saying, well, why didn't Hillary Clinton get in? I feel that what we need to do is to just open up the sequence of what that focus is all about, and not see it literally, but see it metaphorically. That actually, if Hillary didn't get in, why didn't she get in? Well, rather than just referring to was her personality restrained, or any of the predilections that we have in answer to her, whether we're support of her or not in support of her. I believe that actually what will happen is that we'll see within the collective experience a metaphoric awakening of the divine feminine consciousness. And so what we're going to be moving into is a sensation of charity, a sensation of peace, a sensation of empathy, a sensation of understanding, a sensation not of criticism or of judgment, but of discernment.
So, the feminine that I think all three of us are talking about is there's something beautiful and divine about the feminine that's fluid and creative and artistic, and it really does radiate unconditionality.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
absolutely, yeah.
I voted for Hillary, but I don't feel that from her. Obviously don't feel that from Trump. I felt that from Bernie, a lot more of that from him. So maybe that could be a little bit literally and a little bit on a broader non-physical perspective, aspects of why she didn't win, as it were.
Yeah.
Maybe because she's got a lot of male energy.
She, what's funny is when she gave her concession speech, she showed the feminine side of herself, and most people said if she would have shown that throughout your candidacy, she probably would have won, or at least had a lot more support.
But even behind that for me, that was her walls were down, and it was just like, okay, for right now it's over, and I'm going to be the bigger person here and come out and be gracious, if you will. But still behind that is everything we've seen for X number of years.
Yeah.
It's still the harder part, but that was the best part I have seen of her too.
Yeah. Well, maybe
that felt
that's
sincere.
Maybe that's what it was all about.
Yeah.
You see, maybe her presidential race is actually insignificant in relation to that moment, and that moment that she was used by the divine beings that we know are in absolute understanding, comprehension, and support on a soul level of what the whole nature of our transition is all about, and used her as a vessel in that moment to communicate an immense aspect of what the divine feminine consciousness can be about at this time.
And on the same note, with Donald Trump, when he was sitting in the White House with President Obama,
Completely different.
and he looked like he literally had the energy of what the F did I just do?
Yeah, because his shoulders were hunched.
Yeah.
His hands were in between his legs.
What now?
Yeah, it's like, oh shit. He really did.
There was
He
a
really
lot
did.
of and that was a breakthrough moment. That was vulnerable.
Yeah, and you don't get to see that too often with him either.
No.
Yeah. So the feeling that I get as you describe this, because I didn't see the scene, is one of humility.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
And again, that's a big, in the mass media communications that we have, that visual that you saw, that's being transmitted to millions and millions and millions of people all around the world. So they receive the charge of humility. It's up to us to then register it and then bring it into our own lives. So I feel that we're going to actually see more gestures like this, do you see?
Yeah.
That we're going right into the microscopic nature of the way that the divine feminine can transmit her message as freely as possible.
When people are yelling and screaming at each other and flipping out and having protests, et cetera, against him, you can't hear that piece that you're describing. You're not in it then. You're in fear.
Yeah. And I guess for me, when it happened, I was numb at first. Then I started getting a little angry because I saw the responses of people on both sides. I mean, and even directed straight at me, and I'm like, I'm just sitting here doing.
What were you doing?
Well, when I first, all I'd put up was I said, I can't believe this. Or seriously, that's all I put. And then people started coming at me, and they didn't even know who I said, but I think it was just people that knew I supported Hillary, privately, but I really didn't talk about it that much. Not much. Well, that much, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, but I don't sit there and try to attack somebody else saying, oh, just because you're a Trump supporter, you're a racist. I don't say that. Or, if you're a Bernie supporter, you're, ignorant. I didn't. I mean, Eddie and I used to joke. No, I'm just saying I'm not saying that you were, or, that's the American right. If you want to vote for somebody, you vote for them.
And it's the American right for you to be able to say what the hell's going on.
Right. So,
Absolutely.
But then the anger quickly, when I saw the reaction of people, went to wait a minute here. This is not
that's
democracy.
Energy that's got to go somewhere.
Yeah, so that's when I started trying to diffuse things, saying, let people get angry for a while. It's like a death in a family or a relationship that ends because you have to go through the stages of grief. And some people
were going on a date with Bernie, and then all of a sudden somebody knocked him out of that date, and I had to go date Hillary. I didn't ask for that on a logical, physical level.
Well,
So it's a psychic release, isn't it?
Yes.
What you did was to state through freedom of speech what you were feeling about the event, and then automatically you receive this tsunami response of negativity. Same here. I wrote this beautiful newsletter directly from the Angels of Atlantis, which is full of a discerning, loving, charitable energy, which talks about specific individuals, but never in a corrosive way, never in an excoriating way. I put it on Facebook, and there was a literal tsunami, barrage of negativity, saying, how could you're supposed to be a celebrity in the angel world, how could you possibly do that? They hadn't
obviously hadn't read it.
They hadn't clearly read it, rather. So what they were doing is just simply responding through the incendiary devices that I'd sort of put to evoke what you were talking about.
Yeah.
And you see, what I did in response was not to react. I responded rather than reacted. I didn't get into the actions that I can commit myself to, which is to get frustrated or angry or displaced or whatever.
Or what we call spirit fingers.
Your hands were too low, so the camera didn't
I know
get
what
it.
they were.
Spirit fingers.
Yes.
So it could be spirit fingers.
That's right.
So what I did was immediately move into prayer.
That's smart.
I moved immediately into prayer. And the prayer that I said was, "Dear souls, may to put my spectacles on so I can see properly, may the soulful part of our being honor these forthcoming days of political uncertainty as the president-elect gains office. May grace permeate through Mr. Trump's intelligence so that he choose the way of love, truth, justice, and beauty. May all distress be removed from the hearts and minds of all global citizens. May you be led by soulful meaning just as your bodies desire oxygen. And may all your days be lit with the glory of love. And so it is. Amen."
Wow.
And that was that people
And you
responded
see,
negatively.
and automatically there was another wave of energy, of pure joy, of pure love, and of an elevated state of consciousness.
That was
So
gorgeous.
I feel, that, well, be the change you want to see. It's very easy for me to get reactive because I'm a very passionate, sensual being. So, of course, I want to say, what are you doing? But actually, it's not going in a discernible way of believing in the forthcoming nature of what
Right.
peace can bring about. So what I'm trying to do is to remain resolute in the conviction of, okay, so when you receive the negative, let's just smile and love in response.
That's gorgeous.
Really
That's beautiful.
difficult. Because, our experience is that we arise out of a so-called minority group where we've all experienced tremendous prejudice and
Yes.
violence and brutality.
Yes.
Just as our African-American peoples or any of the minority groups, the LGBT groups around the world have received untold violence. But actually, at the same time, if we can rise through a soulful pride, not through the ego's pride, and just simply say, okay, whatever happens, I know that I'm a vessel for the divine, and I'm going to try and shift this moment into something much more beautiful.
Wow.
Well, that's what I did too.
So the spiritual fingers were placed in prayer.
Yes, they were.
Heavenwards it goes.
Yes.
Pick which
Upward.
one. On that day, on days like that, when there's a big shift, a big change, do you feel the angels speak more?
Oh yeah. Like a wind of energy came in,
'Cause
so
they get it.
flapping wings.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely, because they recognized the distress and the unrest that took place in all of our bodies. And so automatically they come in. Of course, this is a planet of free choice, so their consciousness is a vibration of loving for the sake of loving.
Right.
So they're not necessarily going to come in and say, oh, you got to do this. What they do is they wait for us to literally draw them in.
Yes.
And then they come in and support us, not in the ego's appreciation, so to speak, of the downward trend towards depression or anxiety or fear or anger and then brutality and cruelty and so forth,
Right.
but much more towards the higher vibration, because actually the soul doesn't know the pain. The soul literally wants to move in the direction of the higher vibrations of love, of peace, of charity, of empathy, and of compassion.
And part of the way to get there is the contrast we experience here. And from a non-physical perspective, and totally correct me if I'm off skew here, we chose this.
Yes.
We picked this as a loose blueprint
Yes.
that we could be a part of and participate in, or say, oh, hell no, and not. But because we have free will and we chose it from non-physical perspective, we're all part of a big, great thing right now in this country, whether we see it with our three-dimensional eyes and ears or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for bringing that in. That we all have an opportunity. This is a planetary vibration of duality.
Yeah.
So there's always a contrast. Always a contrast. The question is, well, where do you want to sit with the contrast? And so we're always given an opportunity if we can just simply detach, feel stillness and observe. If we can really work on feeling our breath, slowing us down so that we don't suddenly respond through a knee-jerk reaction or through startle reflex into I'm going to attack, which is very easy for us all to do when we're being got at, so to speak, and people are being unjust or rude or cruel or brutal. But if we can actually detach, feel stillness, and observe, I believe that this is what Gandhi was teaching and what Martin Luther King was teaching in relation to nonviolent, peaceful protest. And so the contrast rests within our
Yes.
choice.
It actually, when you look back when Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement, it would take so much within yourself to see a lot of these African Americans and even the people, white or Caucasian, that would support them and
Outwardly.
go outwardly and go down south and go to these restaurants and places and physically go into the restaurant knowing that they're going to get beat up, and they tell you do not react back.
Right. They were trained.
They were trained to, but that would take so much, being spit in your face.
And hot coffee poured on you, and attacked by dogs, fire hoses, shot. It's devastating.
So
I was there.
I mean, it just to think about the willpower and the spirituality that you have to believe in something bigger than yourself. That brings chills to me.
Yeah, me too. I think of those people that were brave enough to do that are some of the bravest leading edge people on planet Earth in human form. And you know, again, better than I do, when you have somebody like that who is going to be right in the center, the core essence of that giant conflict, and their soul brought them here in human form to penetrate that and get to the other side of unconditional love, would they not have more angels, guides, beings, and non-physical helping them hold that space that you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the difficulty is that we're living through this spiritual narcolepsy, so we don't often see the spiritual phenomenon that we're talking about. We don't often see the works of magic or the works of the miraculous. And of course, much of our educational or conditioning system, it brings us to the point where we become fixated in the cerebralization of our world, and that the material is the most important thing. Whereas actually, as we know in our conversation now, we know that the material is purely and simply a resting place for being able to really become anointed in spirit.
Yeah.
You know, I'm reminded of that great quote by Gandhi: first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. So that's quite interesting, yeah. However, as you were saying about the angels hosting in, I believe fundamentally that what happens is that we are accruing blessings as we don't react, as we move into response-worthy conduct, and we literally keep the faith. That sometimes means that we need to be really, really tough.
Yeah.
It's not all about tender love. It's actually simply about standing and saying, I do not agree. This is unjust.
Firm and fair.
Firm and fair. But at the same time, if we can allow that to be an emission of grace rather than you know, the controlling nature of I want to attack. You know, Jesus actually showed this to us in Luke, didn't he? Because he went into the synagogue, his father's house, and it was being used roughly and crudely by the money changers and the tax collectors. And he said, what are you doing in my house? And literally overturned tables. And it says in Luke that he picked up a whip. It doesn't say he hit anybody, but I bet he gave a great crack of that whip. In other words, he was actually saying, I protest in the face of this. This is unjust. We need change. So I feel that story is actually a metaphor or a parable for us to understand how we can step forward and be absolutely embodied by justice. And of course, Martin Luther King said, the moral arm of the universe is long, but it always bends towards justice. You know?
Yeah.
The difficulty is that when we're being impinged by violence and rudeness and crudeness and brutality, you know, like somebody who I passed this morning when I was doing some grocery shopping, who, you know, didn't like the way I looked and so hit me. You know, yeah, literally on you know, a very nice area of Los Feliz. And I just turned around and said, what was that all about? And he came towards me to hit me again, and I just went, no. And he stopped. And I said, may the peace of God be with you. I just walked on. And he was stunned by it. I mean, he really felt the chi as it entered him. And I knew that I was surrounded by a host of angels helping me. In the way that, for example, I mean, this is another metaphor, but I believe that when we see those people throwing themselves out of those windows of the Twin Towers to their death, they preferred that to the burning inferno inside. What we're not seeing is that they were throwing themselves into the arms of angels or into the wings of angels.
Yes.
And so we see the bodies through gravity falling, but actually their souls were already taken.
Exactly. And some people keep forgetting that part of it. They forget it with babies coming into the earth plane, and they forget it. I think what humans do, we're classic narcissists. Whether we're wired to be to a point. When you see something that awful and you see those people jumping out of those buildings, you immediately put yourself in their position. and then you start going through this horrific imagery inside, but the soul is gone. The soul has left the body. That's just a piece of whatever physical something, but it's not the whole beingness. So it's. I mean, I've had enough out of body experiences. I've been knocked in the head a lot, y'all.
Oh, that's what happened.
Yeah, and it.
I'm just kidding. I love my Eddie.
But I have a question. In the middle of everything that we're all talking about, I want to go to the voice for a second. So people think they use their voice, and their voice is the vehicle to be heard. But I'm assuming it's one small facet, and the vibration within it, like how you stood firm and fair to the person who was being passive-aggressive and physical. So the voice is a vibration. It's a frequency. And when we get scared and fearful, we obviously shut down, even though we might be yelling and screaming. There's way less energy in that, I would think, than a pure feeling safe person expressing energy. So give us an illustration of the difference of someone screaming something like "we hate Trump" or "we hate Hillary" versus someone standing in their power feeling completely good. What would be a visual equivalent of that?
Or a vibrational
Yes.
equivalent to that. Well, when we become very upset, we become hysterical. And so the voice does this. You know, we can't breathe, we don't feel grounded, and automatically the energy goes soaring up into the upper body. You know, an image that comes, a resonance image that comes to my mind, because I see sound, so I see it as images. That's one of the reasons why I couldn't read before about 14, because I was seeing sound. I'm synesthetic, so I see sound.
Yeah.
However, the image that comes to my mind is the shrieking pitch of Adolf Hitler, and how that vibrational resonance, that vibrational frequency, was something that was able to excite in the consciousness of the German people. Well, it's interesting that German as a language tends to be much higher in the body. I mean, it's there, you know, if you hear the German sound, it's very here. I mean, this is very stereotypical, you may say. Ausgezeichnet, ja, du sprichst Deutsch, ja. Whereas when we move into the Romantic languages, there tends to be more weight in the tone of the sound. So, in the rather than giving our power away through hysteria, if we're able to detach, feel stillness, and observe, what we can then do is to breathe really, really deeply and take our voices deep into the core of our signature note, our soul sound, which comes out of the heart. And then what we can really do with power is to say, this is my truth, this is my power. And it's extraordinary how that resonance really affects, that the weight and the gravitas of that resonance really affects the observer, the listener, the perpetrator of whatever's taking place on the outside of us.
Well, even just that little bit you articulated, the frequency shifted 3 times.
Yeah.
And it got
Yeah.
broader and broader and broader.
Right.
More broad? Right. More broad.
More broad, broad. Yeah. And that, of course, in my work as a voice coach and as a sound healer, I give people the option of being able to explore that if they're open to their breath. And many of us are not open to our breaths, you know, our breathing rather. We tend to be very high in the body with our breath as a result of stress, and as a result of when we breathe in, we breathe the world into our beings, and if we breathe out, we breathe ourselves out into the world. Well, if that's hostile, then we hold our breath.
Yes, we do.
And so what happens is that our voices become very light, like this. And, you know, not that I wish to condemn or criticize or throw anything in the direction of the dear HC, Hillary Clinton, but everybody's talking about her voice as being very shrill and shouting in tone, except she was using that American sound that she uses, you know. It was very like this, as opposed to really sitting in the fullness of her core, in the way that we heard Bernie Sanders always talking from his heart.
Yeah.
I perceive, or have been led to perceive, Bernie as being a very old soul, you know,
Me
who's
too.
been through many incarnations to find a way of being able to stand in the conviction of what he was standing in through that process, that election process, and really remain in the heart. So he always appeared to be very kind.
That's what I always felt too. And sparrows, newsflash, are messengers from Spirit.
The one that landed on his podium.
Yes, the one that landed on his podium, then landed up on the platform, then the podium. That is divine. That's it really is. So I'm a firm believer that it'd be fun to know you when you were 7. I believe that when we're under 10 years old, from birth to 7, I firmly believe that whoever you are before you reach 8 years old as a kid is going to be exactly what I'm going to have to deal with when I'm 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and 80. Right. So I was, as a kid, born and raised to be seen and not heard, quiet. And I was a good mute for a long time. It still can be. Don't you say nothing. And how does that being raised that way affect a person when they get older? As I keep working toward, standing in my power, and it's safe to communicate. No one's going to, take me out to the woodshed, that sort of thing. And I'd be interested to know what parts of this country, I'm not putting you on the spot, what parts of this country have the most soothing voices, the population in the United States have the most soothing voices, or the most fragmented and the most grounded. Gosh. It would be interesting to know.
But I always heard, real quick, that Southern is the best salesman because people are more like, Bush, hey, come and have it.
He might be from Texas.
But you know what I mean? But
Texas
he used his
not
accent.
Southern. I hate that.
But he used the accent, and people like, oh, he just, down to earth, buddy. Just come on, and people like salesmen, they say that are the best salesmen because people believe them.
You mean Southerners are the best salesmen?
Yes, because people believe their voice. I mean, they feel like we're just friends. But
I wonder if they believe it now.
Probably not.
Some of the southern dialects, and we're losing them, aren't we? Because
right.
there's so much geographical mobility, so they're very different from how they were 50 years ago. And we know on this great landmass that the metallic sound of, that thing that goes like that, it's really increasing wherever you go. I mean, that's very sort of tight Jewish New York, isn't it? But that is increasing more and more and more and more. And when we close off the back of the tongue against the roof of the mouth, which is what I was doing just then, as opposed to doing this, what happens is that we lose the melody that I think you're speaking of, the rhythm and the melody of, can I hear the southern sound?
It's
I was listening to you just now, actually, yeah. It has that melody that goes like that, and it really sings. It's very undulating and very soft.
Rhythmic and fluid, even though it can be real twangy. We call it mountain goats, hillbillies and mountain goats. But it's one of the last populations in our country that still has that bleed through from France and the European countries. And they made fun of us for a long time, but we were the last to hold on to our European sound, even though we had to twang it out a little bit.
I never heard that. That's fascinating. Because I always feel that we produce our sound as a result of the physical circumstances in our lives. So, for example, we know that I think you were probably just referring to this when you were talking about the twang.
Yeah.
That where does the twang come from? Does it come from the hills? Does it come from the mountain region of the south?
It does.
Do you see? It's rather interesting.
It is. The higher you go, the twangier they get.
Isn't that interesting?
Dolly Parton. She was
exactly.
Yeah.
The Appalachian Mountains and so on and so forth. But when you actually have undulating landscapes, then the sound that we produced, dialectually speaking, tends to take on the undulating nature of that landscape.
Yeah.
Very simply. So our physical circumstances condition the way that we are psychologically. When you move into the harsh, unremitting concrete of some of the major cities, particularly on the eastern seaboard, that's when you begin to get that really, really strong nasality like that, because you're constantly moving across this harsh landscape. The same thing happens throughout the other areas of the world. I mean, if I think of the Welsh sound, it's very undulating and slightly breathy like that,
Yeah.
And when you go to Wales, of course, there is this undulating landscape. There are mountains, but mostly in the north. And the southern Welsh, they really do. They go like that the whole time. It's very, very cozy,
I wonder, does your voice change if you're if you grow up around green like we did, earth, trees, green, rivers, creeks, rocks, animals, versus the concrete jungle.
Oh God, yeah.
It's got
Absolutely.
to influence
Absolutely.
your voice somehow.
Absolutely. And it is, what we're speaking of, I believe, is purely vibrational.
Yes.
So I'll give you a story, which I always found very interesting. As you know, my biography reveals that I was the master of voice at Shakespeare's Globe for 10 or 12 years. And part of my process, part of my professional responsibility, was to help the creation of a conservatory at the Globe for young American actors. And these young American actors primarily came from Rutgers University in New Jersey. And when they arrived, so they'd come to London for 23 weeks. Can you imagine? They were masterclass at the Globe. They experienced the life in London. I mean, it was an extraordinary program.
Yeah.
However, when they first arrived, I would meet them in a large rehearsal studio and introduce them to the nature of the work that we would encounter through the 23 weeks. And I was always aware of the fact that they were doing this to me. They were sort of leaning in and trying to hear very precisely what I was actually saying. So I would often watch this and then say, "Are you okay?" And they would say, "Actually, we're finding it really difficult to hear what you're saying." And I would say, "Oh, that's really interesting, because the volume of sound that I'm producing is perfectly adequate for this room.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for over 40 years, so I know that it can be heard. But from a vibrational point of view, it's very different from what they're used to being.
Wow, that's interesting.
In 3 weeks' time, the whole of their kinesthesia had completely recalibrated to this quality of sound that I'm producing, and nobody was saying, "I can't hear you."
Because where they grew up and where they were raised, you're competing with all of these other sounds too. And all of a sudden, it's just this one clear, balanced, anchored, aligned tonal frequency. And they're not used to that. My friend David, who went to acting school at Carolina with Sandra Bullock, that was his acting partner. The first thing they did when they went into class, the very first day, the acting coach recorded all of them reading one page, just one page. And Shakespeare said, "Where at UBN Radio? There's a question in the chat room." And then at the end of the year, he had them reread it. And then he handed them, he let them hear their voice with everybody else's the first day they were there, and then had them reread it. And then they got to compare the frequency and how much they had grown, but the adaptability, because the voice is the only audible expression you have. I think that's why I love art and dance and movement and design, because you don't have to talk. And I could express without getting in trouble.
So that goes back to that lovely space inside you that likes to be mute.
Well, your microphone a little bit closer. There you go.
Sorry,
you can just pull it to you.
That's okay.
I beg your pardon.
Yeah. But it does. It was my saving. It was my way to communicate without talking.
Yeah.
And working. I was a workhorse
Right.
from the time I was like 5 years old. And that was a way to communicate without saying a word, because you couldn't talk. You could talk, but you get hit.
Did you sing during the work?
Not when somebody was around. And I would dance. I would dance one time on my grandma's back porch. Remember those old washing machines that had the rollers in it? Terry Guy's hand caught in that. We were out. I didn't know it was gospel music. It was just really high energy, and it had a lot of move to it. And I was just back there doing my work, and I was sort of dancing around. No one was there. Grandma was watching me from through the screen door.
Oh, no. That's a sin, dancing to
Yes, it
gospel
was,
music.
and she let me know it. Break 3 switches.
Wow.
Yeah, I did some dancing after that. Yeah, but
Wow.
yeah, but when nobody was around, I do, and I'm terrified to sing. Tony's a singer.
I used to sing a lot. I don't sing as much as I used to, but I'd love to. It's an expression for
I
me.
do
It's like
too.
dance.
But I sing from here up.
Yeah. Oh, see,
Yeah, well, you know how to sing.
now, but
You gonna
growing
sing a
up,
song?
what? No. Growing up, though, I didn't. I just sang, and I didn't know how. But once I took vocal lessons, and I learned properly how to sing. Before we get out of here, I can't believe the
Holy
time's
cow!
going-
Holy cow!
I told you it's going so fast. I know we only have
There's
just
2 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
But Matt in the chat room, and thank you for people that's tuning in to us on Periscope Live, Facebook Live, ubnradio.com. But Matt was asking, he goes, I'm not religious, and this is directly to you, but I was raised Jehovah's Witness, and they, as most religions, are using this predicament to solidify their belief and convictions that this is prophecy. I'm taking it must be about the election, and it's the beginning of the end. What would Mr. Pearce say to all these people who believe Armageddon or the end times is near?
Well, there is an end time near. Yeah, there's an end time in terms of the nature of what our old paradigm consciousness is all about. Does this mean that there's going to be a final disaster? I don't believe that in the slightest. I believe that we're living the most extraordinary prophecy on this planet, where we are soulful beings living as humans. So we're spiritual beings on a human experience, and that what we're being asked to do is to see that we are continuously, eternally unfolding creative possibilities. And so therefore there is no fixture, there is no permanency, there is no constant. Everything is constantly moving and changing. The question is, what's the quality of the experience?
Wow.
Yeah, per individual.
Yeah.
Per individual.
Yeah.
So so we see that there is a vibration of great dis-ease in the world, and particularly on this great landmass. I bring us back to the fact that we all have a choice of being able to feed that distress or actually finding ways of healing it. And I believe that all of God's work is of the healing heart, where soulful healing can become the medicine of what this time is all about. And if we can move ourselves in that direction, I feel that we have something very extraordinary as a prophecy in our future, which is all about redefining what global democracy is all about.
I have to say, this is one of the great conversations that we get to have with you. I think this is going to be one of those that really helps heal people.
I do too.
I really do. And for people that want to do like
the Voice of Power.
The Voice of Power
Yeah.
on November the 19th.
Yes.
All they need to do is to click on my website, which is www.stewartpearce.com, and that's STEWARTPEARCE, which will be on the Facebook and on your webpage, I'm sure. And just send me an email, and they will always be responded to if they're being nice.
Right.
There you go.
Do you do private sessions with people?
Yeah, I'm here for the next 2 weeks, and I have a few openings, not many, but I have a few openings, and a lot of people are coming for soul readings or angelic sound healing or for voice coaching.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And what about, do you do, let's say somebody here, but you're back or wherever you're at, do you do Skype?
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I have a huge global witness,
Yeah,
so
I
I
was
work
gonna
on
say.
Skype or on FaceTime or through WhatsApp, whatever facilities open.
Check out Zoom.
Zoom.
Check
Really?
out Zoom. It's
Zoom. Google
Yes,
Zoom.
yes.
Yeah.
That's,
I'm not that proficient with technology, so I'm just learning.
Yeah.
It's this balance between the left and the right brain that I'm always finding really interesting.
yeah.
But the gentleman's question is very interesting because
is.
he begins by saying, I'm not a religious man, but I actually subscribe to a religion.
Right.
So it's slightly contradictory.
I think there's a lot of people like that.
Yeah.
There's
like I was raised Southern Baptist,
Right.
and I think of myself as a Christian, but I don't behave like some of the fine Southern Baptists back home in North Kakalaki.
yeah.
I think that's what he means.
But there's a lot of people that say, I'm not religious at all,
Yes.
I'm spiritual. But then they fall for religious beliefs, not spiritual beliefs.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think that's just always instilled into our
Yes.
makeup from the time we were born. So
It's called brainwashing.
yes,
people.
sir.
So it's another aspect of this revolution of consciousness, isn't it?
Mhm.
That I believe that all of our conversation this afternoon has been about spirituality and not about a dogmatic philosophy or ideology that's associated with any specific religion. I'm a pantheist. I believe in all religions. I feel that they're all extraordinary ways towards God if we're living through charity and peace and compassion and love, because love is all there is.
That's right.
Love trumps hate.
Don't say that.
Okay. All right. Well, Stewart, thank you so
I
much.
love that applause.
I know.
Thank you.
As always, thank you. And anytime you're in town, you're welcome to come back and
Bless you.
hang
Thank
out
you.
with Eddie and I.
Thank you.
Well, we want to thank you guys for tuning in. You want to stick around. We got more in the next hour. We have some great opportunity for you guys to learn about the universe and Mars.
And Mars, yeah.
So we definitely want you guys to stick around for that. Go to universe. I'm not gonna. We
Yeah.
made it. We made a
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bless his heart.
I keep wanting to. It's
old
a
habits
habit.
die hard.
I
don't
keep
they?
wanting to say it, but we made a little promo for that. All right. I'm Tony Sweet.
I'm Eddie Connor.
And I'm Stewart Pearce saying thank you for listening.
Yes, and we'll be back in about 7 minutes. Don't go anywhere. Be right back. Hey, thank you for listening to Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie right here on Universal Broadcasting Network. Make sure you go to our iTunes page. Just type in Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie. Listen to us on iHeartRadio. Again, Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie. And go to our YouTube channel, subscribe, and please leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you. So please support our sponsors and make sure you listen to us every Friday right here on Universal Broadcasting Network from 4 to 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Until then, have a good week.